All right, we're live. We're back. I'm going live. Oh, this is different. Sorry, I'll give you a little time. I had to share that and get that off my thought processes, y'all. Oh, so this is different from. I never went live like this. I went live from the Google Hangouts, but this is a little different. But um, this is interesting. So you could actually see the chat from here. Okay, cool. Coming of age in Mississippi, like I said, depending on the response, I'm gonna either read the entire book or I'm just gonna read through her childhood. I mean, there's so much to be learned from her childhood. It's really up to you. If I don't hear much feedback, then I'm just gonna stop here. But we have some chapters to go, so it's all good. So far, um, she's getting older and the mother keeps having more children, and it's the mother got somebody who moved close to who knows her, but other than that, things are pretty much the same. And she's concerned about Raymond and not sure that they can actually trust him to not leave the mother. So even though Mama stopped going to Mount Pleasant when we moved from the country, she continued to pay her membership dues. Raymond and Miss Pearl then belonged to Centerville Baptist, the largest Negro church in town. Now that we were living with Raymond, Mama started thinking about joining Raymond's church. She figured that maybe she would get in with Miss Pearl then by going to their church regularly. One Saturday in early spring, she went to town and bought a new dress and hat for herself. That night before we went to bed, she told us that had we'd have to get up early the next morning because we were going to Centerville Baptist. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time thinking about going there. Raymond had once taken us for a ride and showed it to us. It was a big white frame building on a brick base with cement steps all the way across the front. It had great big windows painted in different shades of blue and green. I wondered as if I fell asleep what it was like inside. Next morning, when Mama woke us up, she was already dressed and our breakfast was on the table. She rushed us through eating all, and then helped us dress in our best Sunday clothes. They can't say we came to church half dressed or looking any kind of way, she said. All the way to the church, she kept looking at us in the back seat of the car. Stop messing with the ribbon before you untie it, she said to Adeline, who was playing with the ribbon on one of her three plaits. Mama was so nervous. Once she looked back and Junior had his hand in his mouth and she slapped him. Raymond drove along smiling and acting like he wasn't nervous, but I could tell he was. When he got there, we were late. Everyone was already inside and we could hear them singing. As we walked in the door, two ushers met us. One directed Raymond down the right aisle to the men's section. The other led us down the left aisle where a group of ladies and children sat. That's interesting because in other spaces, even in certain Hebrew temples, there's a men and a woman space. And some will say, oh, that's separatist, that's segregation, that's sexism. But here we are in Mississippi in the South in the 14 and 50, 1940s and 50s. And she's talking about attending a church that had a women's section, a men's section, which could be helpful, especially in this day and age where a lot of people, women especially, are wearing certain type of, let's just say, revealing clothing to church that could be quite distracting for some. It says the other led us down the left aisle where a group of ladies and children sat about halfway down. I spotted Miss Pearl sitting with Cherry and Darlene and their other sisters, Betty and Vera, in the center pews. When they saw us, they started hunching and whispering, and I knew they were saying things about us. The usher directed us to seats in the right pew, somewhat behind them. I could see them easily now, and I was glad the usher had seated us there. I kept looking at them, and every now and then they would look back to where we sat. Stop looking over there at them, Mama said, as she caught me smiling at Sherry, Darlene. I was sorry that I had looked and smiled at them since they didn't smile back. Now that they were out in public, Miss Pearl and Betty, they were acting like they didn't even know us. After this, I'll never play with them again, I thought. After we were seated for a while, I forgot about them and I began looking around. Since it was pastoral Sunday, Reverend Polk, regular preaching Sunday, the church was crowded. Just like our Mount Pleasant, every member showed up to pay his dues and put on a good front for the pastor. I tried to notice every little thing that happened to see if things were different in a big town church. First, a couple of deacons began the service by offering two long, boring prayers. As each one finished, he hummed a song and the congregation hummed along with him. At Mount Pleasant, the men sang through their noses, and here the deacons were doing the same thing, singing through their noses and hollering and going on. At Mount Pleasant, I had seen men cry in church like women when they were finished praying. At least these men weren't crying. But they were hollering just the same. And just like at Mount Pleasant, I couldn't understand one word of any song. All the old ladies did, though, they were humming right along with them. While the collection for the sick was being taken up, the choir sang a few songs. This was the first time I had been in a church that had a choir. I used to listen to choirs on the radio sometimes, and this one sounded just as good. They sang Rock of Ages and Stand By Me. There were young girls among the singers. Some of them didn't look any older than me. I sat there listening to them and hoping Mama would change her membership to here. Then I could sing in the choir too, I thought. Yes, I'm going to join this church. I don't like Mount Pleasant anyway. When the choir finished the songs, one of the deacons announced the amount taken up for the sick. Then Reverend Polk had been sitting in the pulpit in the big, comfortable pastor chair with two deacons at his side. Rose to his feet. He raised his hands and everybody stood. The choir then sang Sweet G. Y'all know I'm going to say Sweet G. Joined by the congregation. When the song was over, Reverend Polk stepped up to the lectern that contained a big Bible. Hold up, y'all. Uh-oh. 1 second. Dude steps up to the pulpit, but my battery is running low, so let me plug this thing in. For those who just joined us, we're reading Coming of Age in Mississippi. Oopsie. Look this thing. That Bible was the biggest I had ever seen. Reverend Polk was a middle-aged minister with snow white hair. I didn't understand his hair being that white. The only other person I'd seen with hair that white was Miss Ola. Her hair was white because she was very old, but Reverend Polk didn't look half as old as she was. As soon as he opened his mouth, the women in the church started fainting and shouting and hollering and carrying on. One large lady jumped straight out of her seat and fell out stiff as a stick. It took about 5 deacons to carry her outside. It seems as though almost every woman in the church was crying. I looked over at Miss Pearl them again and saw tears in the corner of Miss Pearl's eye. Miss Pearl, the one who came to the mama's bedside after she had a grandchild and didn't even ask her how she was doing. That Miss Pearl? She should cry, I thought. She shouldn't even be in church, and she doesn't even speak to Mama, and she lives right next door to her. I looked at Mama now, and she wasn't crying, but she looked like she would any minute. I didn't understand why all these women were crying. I hadn't heard a word Reverend Polk had said. He looked as though he was mouthing a sermon for a movie or something, and the soundtrack wasn't working. She's looking up. Once or twice, he raised his hand, and the woman hollered even louder. They went on hollering at least 15 minutes after she stopped working his mouth and sat down. After he stopped working his mouth and sat down. So then I knew they weren't crying because of anything he said. They're all probably crying because they're doing somebody wrong, I thought. Maybe they don't speak to their neighbors just like Miss Pearl, and she's crying. They must have done something bad, and they think God is going to slap the breath out of them while they're in church. Yo, this girl be saying some crazy stuff. For those who join us, Coming of Age in Mississippi, this is chapter 5. She's funny, though. Within an hour or so, we went out of church, and this was another thing I liked about Centerville Baptist. Mount Pleasant and the other country churches I had attended held services that last all day. They also kept talking about collections in the country, and here in Centerville Baptist, they took up a collection only twice. As usual, when church was out, a lot of people stood on the church grounds talking for a while. I felt so funny standing there. It seemed as though everyone had something to talk about but us. Mama, Adeline, and Junior and I stood near the car all by ourselves. I noticed that Miss Pearl and Betty then seemed to be popular with the other church members. As Mama stood looking at them, she had tears in her eyes. She had hoped that they would at least speak to her, but they pretended they didn't even see us. Their car was parked right next to ours. They got in and drove off. Yo, homegirl, they just left church. So, and that's her, that, let me continue. They got in and drove off without even looking in our direction. Raymond had been talking with Betty's husband and one of the deacons now. He came to our car and we left. How didn't y'all like Reverend Polk? I'm sorry, how did y'all like Reverend Polk? He said to no one in particular since he realized Mama was in no mood for conversation. Why is his hair that white? I asked. It's been like that ever since he got out of prison. Raymond said, prison? A preacher? What did he do? He killed a man. Then when he was in prison, he worried so his hair turned white. He was called to preach while in prison. The Bible says, thou shalt not kill. How can he kill a man and preach what the Bible say to people? I asked Raymond. Why you got to know everything? Always asking questions all the time. Didn't he just ask her a question? Anyway, Mama said to me, I could tell she was real mad, so I hushed. I didn't say anything else all the way home, but that didn't stop me from thinking about Reverend Polk. He had killed a man, and all he had to do was raise his hand in church and women fainted all over the place. It seemed to me at that time that we were going to church to listen to a killer preacher. A killer preach the gospel of Christ. Then you sit next to your neighbor and playmates, and they don't even speak to you. This didn't seem like church at all. Not the way she says, not the way Christ anyway, not the Christ Mama was always telling us all those good things about. Mama never did go back to Centerville Baptist again, but Adeline Jr. and I went back the very next Sunday, and every Sunday after that. It seemed as though Mama had completely resigned herself to not being accepted, yet she was determined to make Raymond's people accept us, even in their church. Every Sunday now, she made us study our Sunday school lesson just as hard as our regular homework for school each day. Within a month or so, we were not only going to Sunday school, but to the 11 o'clock church services at Baptist Training Union. Later on, Mama was not satisfied with us just going to Centerville Baptist, Later on, Mama was not satisfied with us just going to Centerville Baptist, but now at every Sunday church celebrated holiday, we had to say speeches and participate in every program offered for children and teenagers. It was always we that took part in the programs, but it was always me. Mama gave up on Adeline and Junior in the church too. They were worse in church than in school. They were always giving speeches, but they never did learn them in time to say them. Within a few days after I received mine, I would know it by heart. And when I said it on the program, unlike most of the other participants, I didn't forget or mumble a word. While we were doing all this at Centerville Baptist and winning the approval of all the church members there, Mama decided to go back to Mount Pleasant. Raymond really wanted her to join Centerville Baptist, but Mama just couldn't bring herself to sit up in the same church with Miss Pearl and them. When they argued about it, she would say, you think I'm going to join church with your hypocrites just because you belong over there? She's like, they don't even speak to me. Why should I go over there and give them something to talk about? Be sitting up there looking at me, rolling their eyes and hunching and whispering to each other. Make me so mad I can't even think about what the preacher's saying. Raymond had no defense against what Mama said about Miss Pearl then. So he'd just say, you go on and you join church where you want to join, and go on if you will be happy out there at Mount Pleasant, and go back out there. Even though Mama kept hinting that she was going back to Mount Pleasant, months and months passed and she still didn't go. I understood her feelings about Miss Pearl and them, but I still wanted her to join Centerville Baptist since we were living in Centerville and Adeline and Junior and I were going to church on Sunday school there. I thought it was crazy for Mama to go all the way back to the country to attend church. She should have gone back to Centerville Baptist in spite of Miss Pearl them, instead of running to Mount Pleasant and letting them know that they were getting next to her. Besides, I had gotten to the place I was really enjoying Centerville Baptist. For there, at Darlene's own church, I was outdoing her. Sometimes I would I'm knocking on the door. That's the baby. That's the wall, not the door. Sometimes I would come in from Sunday school raving about how well I had explained the lesson, and Mama wouldn't say anything. She would just look at me. I got the feeling that she wanted me to outdo Darlene, but she still didn't want me to enjoy Centerville Baptist too much. From the way she was acting, I could tell that she wanted Adeline and Junior and me to go back to Mount Pleasant with her. So whenever I said something nice about Centerville Baptist, she would say something nicer about Mount Pleasant. Finally, that August, Mama resumed her church activities at Mount Pleasant. By this time, I was so involved in Centerville that I had made up my mind that I definitely would not join her church no matter what. So when Mama told us to get ready to go to Mount Pleasant on Sunday morning, I didn't say a word. Since she had told me that we'd go out to Aunt Cindy's after church and had got me thinking of all the fun we had always had playing in the woods out there, I figured it would be worth it, even if I had to sit in the church half the day. Besides, I thought, she can't make me join church out there. As Raymond drove up to Mount Pleasant, I saw that just as I expected, things hadn't changed. It was a gloomy day and the graveyard looked just like it did when I used to sit up in school and count the tombstones. Automatically, my eyes were drawn from the tombstones to that little raggedy school building. The cracks in the wood seemed even larger now, and the whole school looked like it was about to collapse. I was sure it was no longer used, but as Raymond parked the car in front of the school, I saw through the open door that they still had Sunday school for the smaller children there. Mama Adeline and I got out the car. As I watched Raymond drive off and Jenny Ann in his lap and James on the seat beside him, I was more aware than ever that we were two families living under the same roof. We went inside the church and sat on the back seats. Sunday school classes for teenagers and adults were being conducted up front. I watched the teenager class for a while and noticed that none of them said anything. Their minds seemed to be very far away. The old lady who was teaching them kept mumbling the lesson as if she was talking to herself. And Mama want me to come Sunday school out there? I thought, remembering our lively discussions at Centerpoint Baptist. In a little while, Sunday school ended and the church began to fill up with adults. Mama knew nearly everybody who walked in. She smiled and waved like she had come home for a long vacation or something. When the adults were all seated, church started. The new minister, Reverend Tyson, was short, dark, and soft-spoken, just the opposite of Reverend Kaysen. He gave a brief sermon and then talked about revival, which will be starting in a week. The look Mama gave me when he mentioned revival made me suspicious of why she came back to church the month before baptism. As soon as the sermon was over, came the first collection. I thought I sat through two collections, but when they started the third, I decided it was time for me to take a break. Since Reverend Tyson's sermon was only about 20 minutes long, I had thought the Mount Pleasant had gotten modern like Centerville Baptist and would let us out early. Now I saw that I was wrong. So I went out back on the church to the same old toilet I used to escape to when I was in school there. I discovered that some of the carvings I made of had made of Reverend Case over 6 years ago were still on the walls. On my way back, I met one of Aunt Cindy's daughters, and we stayed outside talking for 2 hours or so, standing under the oak tree near the toilet. When I thought they were almost through taking up collections, I went back inside the church. As I entered, Deacon Brown was just beginning still another collection, this time for the sick and invalid. And I stood in the back of the church trying to decide whether to stay or not. Sisters and brothers, we've heard the good minister preach here today. Deacon Brown was shouting, and it was a good sermon, wasn't it? Yes, sure was. Thank the Lord. Several old sisters answered, well, now we should be glad and thankful to the Lord that we're able to come and hear Brother Tyson today. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. And you all know that there's much more fortunate than those brothers and sisters of ours who are lying in their bed sick. Yes, Lord. Sorry, y'all. And you all know of our beloved Sister Turner, who's been on her sickbed for many months now. Yes. Let us dig into our pockets and show Sister Turner that we're thinking of her. I got to start this collection with $1. I want y'all all out there to match this dollar. Come on now. Let's show Sister Turner how we feel about it. Here's my dollar, brother, one called, and mine, 50 cents over here. In a few minutes, Deacon Brown had raised about $12. Now he was calling for $15. When he got $15.36, he tried to make it $20. Just as I was leaving to go back inside, I saw Mama having a serious conversation with old Sister Jones, who was now sitting beside her. I knew that she was trying to get Mama to get me to join Mount Pleasant. Usually during revival sessions or season, older sisters of the church recruited candidates for baptism, and Sister Jones always outdid the others. During revival, she went from house to house, hopping on her stick, trying to get members who out unbaptized teenagers to have them to join the church. And a lot of parents got their children to join by telling them that Sister Jones was the bad mouth on them. If they didn't. Now there was Mama nodding her head to everything Sister Jones was saying. You can't force the girl. What the world? Sorry. I just bet Mama's going to tell me Sister Jones say I ought to join church. I thought, well, I'm not. I ain't scared of that old witch. I'm going to join Centerville Baptist. I went back outside trying to convince myself that Sister Jones didn't have any power to put a bad mouth on people. I was walking backwards to the big tree, back towards the big tree, over by the toilet. As I came up to it, I felt sick. I told myself that it was only hunger. I didn't want to believe that I was scared. About 4:30, church finally, well, that's a long time, dude. 4:30, church finally let out. Unlike Centerville Baptist, Mama had lots of friends to talk to here. She had been born in Mount Pleasant vicinity and had been a member of Mount Pleasant since she was 14. She had attended church regularly until we moved to Centerville. She belongs here, I thought to myself, and rightfully so, but not me. Before Raymond came, Mama pointed out about 50 people who said we were cousins or something. It seemed like just about everybody out there was kin to us one way or another. I knew she was introducing me to all of them to try and make me feel like I belonged out there too. But I didn't know anybody but Aunt Cindy, them, and I didn't want to know the rest. All that followed week heading up to the revival, I tried to avoid Mama. Every time I came within hearing distance, she started nagging me to join Mount Pleasant. To get out of her way, I went to pick cotton for one of the neighbor farms. She went to go pick cotton, but she always managed to corner me somehow. Look at here, look at here. Walking around here poking your mouth out. Can't nobody say nothing to you. You better go join church, Mama would scold. I'm going to join church, but I'm not going to join Mount Pleasant. Shoot, they should. Why should we go out there? We go to Centerville Baptist every Sunday. We go Sunday school, church, and everything. Why don't you change your membership? I said angrily. Don't you tell me where to join church. When you expect to join Centerville Baptist, they don't baptize till way next year. You'll be 13 years old next month. I'm responsible for your sins after you reach 12. Sister Jones was telling me about some girl who, Sister Jones, what she got to do with this? She always trying to run everybody's life. Don't you sass that old lady. I'll put a curse on you in a minute. When Mama saw that her nagging didn't help, she stopped. Revival started Monday of the following week, and every day I expected her to try and get me to go. When Wednesday passed and she still didn't say anything about going, I was sure she'd given up. Next day, Thursday, I walked around the house singing and beaming in the thought that I had beat her down. For the first time in days, I sat in the same table with her. Ray, I want you to drive us to the revival tomorrow night, Mama said casual. Reverend Bridge going to preach out there. So that's why she cooked all this good food, I thought. Who's Reverend Bridge, I asked, thinking he must be someone like Sister Jones. You heard about the minister who everybody go hear preach those sermons about dry bones and the eagle stirred his nest. He's the best preacher they got around. Oh, that's Reverend Bridge. I didn't know they were going to have him at Mount Pleasant. I sat there and thought for a while. I knew Mama was just trying to impress me that such famous ministers came to Mount Pleasant so that I would be tempted to go revival. I was tempted too. I was really curious about the famous Reverend Bridge. Besides, I thought it's the last night of the revival and nobody can make me join. The following evening, Raymond drove me, Mama, and Adeline out to Mount Pleasant. He left us as usual, saying he would pick us up after church. When we walked inside, I saw that the place was full, but I was surprised that it wasn't overflowing since Reverend Bridge was going to be there. We sat in the center pews. As the service began, I asked Mama, where was Reverend Bridge? I heard somebody say he ain't come to preach tonight, she said, trying to look disappointed. He ain't coming? I asked, frowning. Who told you he ain't coming? What's the difference? Who told me? Stop asking so much questions all the time. Always got to know everything. Shut up now. Church is starting. I was so mad with Mama. I sat through the prayers and testimonies without hearing one word what that was said. When Reverend Tyson got up to speak, I thought, come all this way out here to hear this dull, blink sermon. Listen to this, I mumbled to myself as he began his usual soft, sweet notes or tones. Tonight, brothers and sisters, since it's the last night of revival, and I know that there's still many of you sitting out there tonight who are undecided about serving Christ, we shall take up our text, Matthew 4. I want y'all out there who's been tempted by the devil to stay out of the church to take a good look at Christ, your Lord, went through and remember his courage and strength in the face of great temptation. He opened his Bible very slowly, clearing his throat slightly, and began to read. Then was Jesus led up the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, brothers and sisters, 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterwards mighty hungry. And when the devil came to him, he said, if thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made of bread. But he answered and listened. And he said, yes, yes. What did he say? It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceed out of the mouth of God. Do you hear that, sisters and brothers? He shouted. Yes. We don't need them fine cars. We don't need them fancy clothes. Yes, Jesus. Let's Lord. Yes, amen. The crowd roared and hollered. I sat there thinking, who in here got fine cars and fancy clothes? He let them holler and amen and shout for a while. Then he said, if you think that was courage, listen to this. And he said, mopping his face with his handkerchief, then the devil taketh Jesus up the holy city and set him on the top of the highest temple. And he said to him, to Christ himself, if thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is said that his angels shall watch over thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up. Sorry, y'all. This thing is close to this thing here. Bear thee up. Lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. And Jesus said unto him, listen, that what he said, children, it is written that thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And the devil, not giving up, Reverend Tyson said, closing the Bible, took Jesus up to the highest mountain this time and showed him all the kingdoms of the world below, and all them big houses, and all them fine cars, and all them beautiful clothes, and said, if thou will fall down and worship all these things, or worship the devil, all these things will I give unto thee. And he shouted, standing on the edge of the pulpit, spit flying in every direction. At this time, Christ got a little angry, and he said, coming down through the aisles, and Jesus said, get thee hence, Satan. And he screamed, throwing his arms and pointing his fingers in my direction. Women were shouting and jumping and hollering and screaming all over the place. Deacons were running around, grabbing, fainting women and shouting, amen, at the right time. Get thee hence, Satan, he said again, for it is written that thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. For those who joined us, we're reading a very colorful portion of this book here, Coming of Age in Mississippi. So it's like a church revival up in here. He paused for a while, breathing deeply, and it seemed like everybody in the church was about to faint. Then the devil left Jesus, and the angels came and ministered unto him, and said, almost whispering as everybody in the church leaned forward to catch his words, suddenly he raised his hand, and fought away the devil. He shouted, going down on his knees, and fought away temptation. He said, getting up, and God's angels came to him. He walked past our row, and as I turned to watch him, my eyes met Sister Jones. I couldn't take my eyes from her sunken eye, wrinkled face. Aren't you ready to give up the devil and come to Christ tonight? Reverend Tyson shouted. Who's going to come? Who's ready? Do we have anybody tonight? Do we have anybody tonight? Will you come? Will you come? He pleaded as he did. Oops, sorry. Sister Jones started singing and all the other sisters joined her. I turned around and looked at Mama, and she had tears running out her eyes. Even Adeline looked like she was about to cry. Come to Jesus. They sung. They all sung. That's a third part chorus there. He will save you. And then that's a third part chorus. He will save you right now, the her church sang. Reverend Tyson reached the pulpit and turned to the audience. Will everybody stand? He said, motioning with the arms. Everybody stood, continued to sing, come to Jesus. Out of all the voices, Sister Jones was the only one I heard. All the Christians, I want you to sit down. So now they're portioning people out. Reverend Tyson shouted over the singing voices, and all the sinners, I want you to remain standing. Now don't you lie to the Lord. People started sitting down. If you a sinner, repent tonight. Stand up and let me see who you are. He's saying, come to Jesus right now. It seemed like I was floating in the air and I had lost sight of where I was. Something was behind me, pushing me. All I could hear was Sister Jones singing and Reverend Tyson saying, will you come? Will you come tonight? I could feel myself moving and I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. I didn't see anybody. When everybody was quiet and the singing stopped, I looked around and saw that I was standing right in the front row of the church at the mourner's bench with a few other candidates for baptism. I was standing face to face with Reverend Tyson. What's your name, young lady? He asked gently. Essie Mae Moody, I stuttered. Speak up, young lady. Tell the Lord your name. Essie Mae Moody, I said a little louder. You want to become a member of this church, Sister Moody? He asked. I didn't say yes. I just nodded my head. Brothers, he said silently, do you accept Sister Moody as a candidate for baptism to become a member of this church? Brother Pastor, said Deacon Brown standing near us, we accept Sister Moody as a candidate to be baptized in Mount Pleasant Church on the second Sunday of next month. When Reverend Tyson finished with the last candidate, he motioned us to return to our seats. I hesitated. I didn't want to go back there to face Mama. When I realized that I was standing there by myself, I turned around and walked slowly back. As I came up to Mama, I didn't even look at her. I just stumbled into the row and sat down. Adeline leaned over and said in a loud whisper, you joined church. Then I looked at Mama. When she smiled at me, I felt like back she wants to do harm to her and Sis, but she said she wanted to kill. She said that's more. And Sister Jones. During the next few weeks, I hardly spoke to Mama at all. Since I had threatened to run away before baptism, I didn't have to avoid her. She was avoiding me. She was so pleased that I had joined Mount Pleasant that she was scared to say anything that would make me mad enough to really run off. Baptism at Mount Pleasant was the biggest event of the year. Some people saved all year to buy a new outfit. Mama got busy planning what we would wear. She went to one of the stores in Centerville that gave credit to Negroes and got a gray fall suit and a pair of shoes for herself. The candidates for baptism had to wear all white, so Mama had a white dress made for me and bought me a blue one for after the baptism. When she said that the white dress symbolized that I was entering the church pure and the blue one meant that I would always be true and faithful to the church, I felt more than ever like running away. Saturday, the day before baptism, it rained. I hope it would flood so the baptism would be called off. Your old homegirl is OD, son. But it didn't rain that hard. On Sunday morning, baptism day, I got up and the rain stopped. I was the last one up. Everybody else had eaten breakfast and dressed and everything. When I saw that Mama had laid my baptism clothes out at the foot of my bed, I sat there thinking of jumping out the window and disappearing forever. Instead, I looked at the white dress, whose white socks and white slip and those white drawers, and thought, this blink means I've been washed clean of all my sins. My sins, I said, kicking everything off the floor like a wild woman. Just then Mama came in. Gal, look at here what you done, getting these white dresses all dirty. Get out of that bed, she screamed angrily, picking up the dress like I had wounded it. No, hold on. How you expect to be baptized laying up in the bed, poking your mouth out, kicking these clothes on the floor? God will slap the breath out of you playing with him like this. Get up, take a bath, and get these clothes on. It's 9:30 and I got to get out there for 11 o'clock. She continued, hollering all the way to the kitchen. Can't do nothing with these hard-headed chaps. Getting out of bed, I looked at those white things again and thought, washed clean. I threw off my pajamas and pulled on the drawers. Wash clean, I said, putting on the slip. Wash clean, I said louder, putting on the sock. Wash clean, I yelled, putting on the dress over my head. Get out of them clothes and take a bath, Mama yelled, and pushed me up onto the bed. Just as I was putting my arms through the sleeves of the dress, which was still over my head, as I hit the bed, I heard a loud rip. Look at here, look at there. Don't tore the dang dress. Gal, I'm going to kill your blink. Get on here, then take a bath while I sew this up. If she going to go get baptized, she said GD. She damned the child, she yelled, pushing me out the room. Finally, I put the white dress on, and we were on our way out to Mount Pleasant. Everyone had left the church for the pond, except the dozens or so of candidates who were waiting for me. I was almost an hour late. A couple of deacons used their cars to drive us to the pond. As we drove past the pond, where they usually had the baptism turned into the old gravel road, I had walked so many times on my way to school, I asked Deacon Brown which pond we were going to. And we're almost done chapter 5, y'all. This was a long chapter. They just built a new pond out there right in front of Miss Rose's. That's a better setup because it'll be easier for y'all to change clothes at Miss Rose's house. Deacon parked the car in front of Miss Rose's saying, oh, they're all out here, huh? Pretty big today. Getting out the car, I looked down the hill and saw hundreds of people standing around near the levee of a big new pond opposite the levee of the far side of the pond. So the whole group of cows, they looked like they were part of the service. We walked through the gate and headed towards the pond. I felt the dampness of the ground from yesterday's rain. It was a gloomy, chilly September morning, and it looked as if it was going to rain again. As I got closer to the crowd, they looked to me like they were huddling together to keep each other warm. Looking at them made me even colder. The girls were shivering in their the gaily colored nylon dresses. The young boys stood motionless in their thin suits with their hands in their pockets. Even the old ladies were cold to talk, were too cold to talk. I spotted Mama in the crowd in their new fall suit and thought, at least she knew how to dress. When we got to the edge of the pond where Reverend Tyson was standing with two deacons, we were told to line up. I looked over at the crowd and saw that they had spread out so everyone could see. There were lots of more people than I had thought. Seeing all those brightly colored dresses and hats, the long earrings, beads, and fancy hairdos, the blood red lipstick laid so thick that on some lips it looked purple, made me even more aware that we were all dressed in white, even the boys. I felt white. I felt like a stuffed white rabbit in an Easter parade. Now that we were all lined up, we were asked to slip our shoes off. Then Reverend Tyson was led out into the water by two deacons. Just as they stepped into the water, I heard Sister Jones' voice sing out loud and clear, "Take me to the water." She was immediately joined by everyone else standing around the pond. "Take me to the water." As the people caught their breaths for the next verse, several moos could be heard. The moos got loud that the singing stopped for a moment. Reverend Tyson, in the water up to his knees, turned towards the cows and raised his hands as if to quiet them. When they stopped mooing, everybody laughed. Then the singing began again. When Reverend Tyson and the two deacons were standing in water up to their chest, the first candidate was led out. Everyone continued to sing, "Take me to the water," but much lower. Most of the candidates looked scared, especially the girl in front of me. I couldn't tell whether she was shaking because she was cold or scared or cold or both. I heard Jack, one of the wildest crap shootingest boys around, whisper from behind, look at all that cow blink in that water." The cow pooed in the water. I looked down at the water and saw big piles of cow manure floating around. That thought of being ducked under the water, that's disgusting, I'm sorry, made me want to vomit. The water was so muddy, the whole pond looked like a giant mud pie. Then let me just keep reading because we're almost there, y'all. How you gonna baptize them in doo-doo? Doo-doo water? Seriously? Mount Pleasant was good. Then I looked at the girl standing between Reverend Tyson and one of the deacons. "I baptize you in the name of the Father, the name of the Son, and the name of the Holy Ghost." "Amen," Reverend Tyson said, drawing out the last syllable as he ducked her head under the water. She came up coughing and sputtering. Her white dress was now dark brown. Her hair was dripping with mud, and all the other candidates stared at her as the deacons helped her back to the edge of the pond. She was shaking and she looked like she wanted to cry so bad. All the candidates were aware of the saying that if you coughed when you were being baptized, it was the devil coming out. I knew she was embarrassed because she had coughed. All dressed in white, washed clean. Look at it. I thought, look at her. You're not supposed to be dipped. I'm going to say a little thing about baptism in a minute after I'm done. As the girl ahead of me was being let out, Jack leaned close and whispered, "Remember, Moody, better not cough out there. Sister Jones going to say you was a sinner." "You got a lot more to cough about than me," I said. I saw two deacons coming for me. As I waded in the water, I could feel the mud stick to my legs. Oh, she actually went in there. She should have ran behind the bathroom. I was mad as Blink. She was mad as Hades. And I heard Sister Jones' voice singing, "Nothing but the righteous," along with the rest. I thought, nothing but the righteous, some doo-doo. I'm going to just put doo-doo every time she said. I was so mad, I barely heard Reverend Tyson shouting, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, in the name of the Holy Ghost. Amen." Suddenly, a wet hand was slapped over my face, and I felt the mud flooding over me, sucking me down. Just as I began to feel the heaviness of the mud, I was lifted out the water. I tried to open my eyes, but mud was stuck to my lashes, so I just left them closed. I felt poopily all over. As they were leading me out of the water, I could hear the cows mooing, Jack laughing, and everybody singing, "Take me to the water." Everything sounded far away. It took me a minute to realize that my ears were stuffed full of mud. After the last candidate was baptized, we were all rushed up to Miss Rose's, where we washed off and changed. Even then, I still smelled like wet mud, and the smell lingered for weeks. For those who just joined it, that was chapter 5. It was rather lengthy, but rather interesting. we're looking at how um, we're looking at how her mother, how is the mentality at that time, the religious affiliation informed the thought processes and forced her into a space, based on what they understood. You have some social issues going on. You have a man who has a family who is not speaking up for the woman who he has impregnated and taking responsibility for. You know what I mean? You have the young girl who's feeling like life is happening to her, but she really can't identify with her own people to a certain degree. That's Shari. She later goes on to, go into civil rights activity, but this is her childhood, and this is how she's processing what she's seeing. So just a side note, to my understanding, baptism comes from the understanding of a mikvah or cleansing, um, that is in the Old Testament, that you're supposed to do in clean running water after you have been, or a body of water after you are coming from a space of uncleanliness. And it can be for whatever reason. This uncleanliness there's a myriad of reasons that you can become unclean. And this mikvah, this cleansing, this bath is symbolic. And Christianity took it and made it into what is this called this baptism, right? This one space of being baptized, and then over the years and the centuries it became something else. So this thought of being baptized in poopily water, I just find that ironic, yo. You know what I mean? That you're gonna baptize her and you're being cleansed, but yet still you're in water that has feces and dirt and everything in it. And so that's just kind of what I wanted to talk about quickly. But again, I'll come back and tomorrow, most I will, and address some other things. There's some things in the news, as well as I want to finish up this childhood portion. If you're enjoying it, if you're getting some value out of it, and like again, this is a period piece, and so some of these things we can learn about, this. She would have been like our grandmother. I think she died in 2015. I think when I looked it up, she died in 2015. Hold on, let me try to give you correct information here. And Moody, I think she did die in 15. Hold on. So these are stories. What she's telling, this is, maybe it's me, but I like sitting at the knees of elders. I like hearing stories of where they're coming from and what it's like. So this is kind of like sitting at her knees. And actually, she died. So this is probably why I didn't even know the day she died. But she was born August 15th, 1940. So this is the 40s. She's born exactly in 40. So this book is starting in the 40s and the 50s, and she was living on a plantation at that time in Mississippi. And so this is very nice, not that far away. And she passed she passed February 5th of 2015. So 4 days ago would have marked 4 years of her passing. And so we're actually reading her book in her birth month. And this is a story where you can pass this information on. This is part of our problem, is that we have been cut off from knowing. We have been cut off from understanding what happened before us. We are not that interested in what the elders have to say, what those who've come before us have to say. And because of that, we repeat the same mistakes. We don't learn from the things that have happened. There's a lot of things already in the first 6 chapters of her life that she shared with us, that you can see what that would inform her belief systems. And I said that before, to come. And so for this value, not only just learning about who she was, but the value of a period piece that she's giving us a look into Mississippi at this time, I think is invaluable. So with that said, thank everybody for tuning in. We'll come back and read a little more. And if there's a news story that you have out there and you want a Solonomics perspective on the news story, and provided I have time to shoot me the news story, I'll put the link in the box. I know I saw this Gucci news story, and I kind of wanted to do a little more research on it before I give my 2 cents on it. But I saw that with the sweater and the lips thing and triggering. I did already a story last week about the teacher who put on blackface to do this presentation. And so here we are with Gucci having a long sweater with red lip outline, and then there's outrage behind that. I don't know. I'll think about that one. But so with that said, everybody have a blessed night. One.